So today our topic is happiness in the workplace, and our speaker is Aimee Bucher. Aimee is a member of the Rotary Club of Lima and is the CEO and founder of Harrison Latham. Harrison Latham is a group of world-class coaches and consultants focused on creating happier workplaces. Aimee is an international best-selling author, professional speaker, and an ICF-certified coach. She holds degrees from Miami University and The Ohio State University. She is certified in emotional intelligence, predictive index, performance gap indicator, and energy leadership. She has worked with a wide range of organizations from single-person startups to established Fortune 500 companies, as well as educational institutions and nonprofits. Aimee is also a classically trained pianist, mother of 4 amazing kids ages 12 to 21, a professional actress, and founder of the improv group #SorryNotSorry. Welcome, Aimee. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Emily. I appreciate that intro very much. I would love to be able to share my screen. I have some slides that go along with this, but I'm not able to right now. Scott, can you fix that for me? Oh, I see him nodding his head, working on it. All right. I just want to say quickly, Violet, it's good to see you here. I taught on the Lima campus for 3 years back in the day, and I didn't know that story about the elks, so that was very intriguing. Thank you for your work. I appreciate that. All right, here we go. I can share my screen. So what actually happens when a company focuses on employee happiness, and why does happiness even matter in business? Why are we even talking about it? Let's imagine a scenario we're all familiar with. Picture walking into work on a typical Monday morning. What's the general mood? Likely everybody's tired, a little sad that the weekend is over. There's a certain level of stress everyone's feeling. Maybe you walk in knowing how many emails are waiting in your inbox and you're already behind. The day has not even started yet and you already feel like you're behind for the week. So typically Monday mornings in most organizations is not a happy time. Now, if you'll imagine the scenario again with me, but let's change it up just a little bit. Imagine walking into work on a Monday morning and everyone there, including you, is genuinely happy to be there. Everyone's excited about the work they're going to get to do that day. Everyone's looking forward to seeing and interacting with their colleagues. People are happy and eager to get the day going. Imagine if Mondays at 8 a.m. had the same happy energy as Fridays at 5 p.m. How would that change the company? How would productivity be different? What would engagement levels be like? What would happen in various departments like, say, sales? So the cool thing is we have data that answers all of these questions. We have data that tells us exactly what's different in a happy company and how happiness affects all the various parts of an organization. When employees are happy, productivity increases. Happy people work harder. When employees are happy, task accuracy increases. Happy people take pride in their work. When employees are happy, profitability increases. Happy people believe in the purpose of the organization and they drive it forward. And happy people sell more, a lot more. What could a company do with a 37% increase in sales? Herb Kelleher founded Southwest Airlines in 1967 and was the CEO for over 30 years. His vision for the company was simple. Employees come first because happy employees do better work. Better work makes the customers happy because they get great service, and that makes the stakeholders happy because the customers keep coming back and the company makes more money. Until the pandemic hobbled the entire travel industry, Southwest was the only major airline in the world to have turned a profit every year since the 1970s. As the entire travel industry continues to struggle with the pandemic, Southwest has continued to fare better than all the other major airlines. And why is that? Their committed focus to their employees. The vision that employee happiness is job number one. Happy employees do better work. Better work creates happier customers. Happier customers create more profit for the company, which in turn creates happier stakeholders. The strength of the Southwest Airlines vision is carrying them through this crisis, and they will undoubtedly come out successful on the other side. And their customers and the industry continue to recognize just how powerful this focus on employee happiness truly is. What is happiness? How do you define it? For a lot of people, happiness feels like this fluffy concept that's really hard to wrap your head around and define. And if you're feeling that way, you are not alone. I'm currently writing my next book, and I've been interviewing experts from all over the world, and it's fascinating. These are people who spend all of their working hours researching, studying, understanding the science of happiness and how we create more of it in the world. In these interviews, I ask a lot of questions, but I ask every one of them this one very specific question: how do you define happiness? And this group of incredibly intelligent global researchers do not agree on the definition. They each give a different answer to that seemingly simple question. So if you feel like you don't quite know how to define happiness, you're in good company. But I do want to share a definition that we can use for our purposes today. Because when I'm talking about happiness, I'm not talking about the fleeting types of happiness that we all experience. That feeling you get when something good happens to you. Like you play with a puppy and you feel happy, or you have a great meal at your favorite restaurant and you feel happy. These moments of externally produced happiness are absolutely important for our well-being, and I'm not dismissing their value. But for today, we're talking about the happiness that you create within yourself and then within your organization. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky is a professor at the University of California. She spent almost all of her career studying happiness and is considered one of the world's leading experts in happiness research. We're going to start with her personal definition of happiness, and I'd like to read it to you. Happiness is defined as the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well-being, combined with a sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. Now, this is a great definition for personal happiness, but what does it mean in an organizational setting? How does this definition apply systemically? We can use Dr. Lyubomirsky's personal definition of happiness to create a systemic organizational definition of happiness this way. Happiness in its most basic form feels good. It's pleasurable. We enjoy it. A strong signal that an organization is happy is you can observe it. You can see that people are happy. They enjoy their work. They feel good about their work. We're all driven by some kind of purpose. Every person wants to feel as though they're part of something bigger and more important than just their daily tasks of life. Organizations are happy when employees not only understand the bigger purpose behind their work, but they also truly believe in it. So our definition of organizational happiness is a happy organization is one where people feel good about themselves and their work, and all employees believe their work has purpose and meaning beyond the bottom line. Okay, great. So how in the world do we achieve organizational happiness? How do we create systemic happiness in our companies? You might be asking, where do we even start? There are three things we're going to talk about today. Three things you can do immediately to start leading your organization in a happier direction. We're going to use the acronym MAT, M-A-T, to identify these three things. Think of it like a welcome mat. Welcome to a happier organization. The M stands for measure the data. You measure everything in your company because it's important to know what's working and what's not. And happiness is no different. But this step of measuring happiness is typically a huge block for an organization. Even the most seasoned leaders get tripped up because how do you measure happiness? What's that even look like? So maybe you do an annual engagement survey, or maybe you just go with your gut feeling in a smaller team and you just kind of judge how everybody's doing. The problem with annual surveys is they're only annual. And as we saw in 2020, a lot can change in a single year. And your gut feeling, your intuition, that is important and it's valuable, but you need actual data that gives you a complete, unbiased picture. You need access to objective data that shows how your people are doing. You need to be able to quickly and clearly see the emotional health and happiness. You need data that can be segmented so you can track those patterns in teams or across departments or locations. Unfortunately, we have the technology to do this now. Two of my favorite tools out there are Friday Pulse and Heart Count. They're not identical tools, but they have some key similarities. They're both based on the foundational idea of a simple automated weekly check-in with every employee. And they both provide dashboards so you can see at a glance how every person, team, department, the whole organization is doing. So the actual tracking of the data, the measuring of the data, it's not that hard. We've got these tools that make it pretty simple now. I spoke with Nick Marks of Friday Pulse not too long ago. They're offering this personal version now called Friday One, and you can use it for free. If you're curious about the actual items that are measured in a happiness assessment, I encourage you to check it out. So Friday One has the same 5 key areas that Friday Pulse has, and you can see it all for free. Now, here's a caveat. When we measure organizational happiness, don't actually measure it. Don't track the happiness of your employees unless you're going to do something with that data. If you're not going to take action on the results, don't measure anything. We've all done the engagement surveys that are reported to the big meeting to upper management, and then they get shoved in a filing cabinet somewhere and are never seen again, right? And how do employees feel about that? Not so great. Same thing with happiness data. Getting input from your employees and then ignoring that input will create unhappiness. And that's the opposite direction of where we're headed here. So once you have the data, you need to take action on it. And like the measurement, taking action doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a new fancy program or some involved system. At the baseline foundational level, you can simply use the results as conversation starters. So during a weekly huddle, a manager can say to the team something like, hey, our team's happiness level took a dip last week. Let's talk about why that is and see what we can address. Now, maybe team members had unclear instructions on a new project and they were frustrated, or maybe there was an unhappy client who just made everybody's jobs miserable. There are often things that you can address to increase your team's overall levels of happiness. There might not be things you can address. If someone has a crisis happening at home, a death from COVID, their spouse lost their job, there are a lot of factors, especially right now, that affect us emotionally, and all of that shows up at work. But simply communicating and asking the questions, it opens the door for your people to know they're being heard, to know the organization values them, which in turn helps them be their best selves at work, which ultimately makes them happier. So measure the data, get continual objective information on how happy your people are, and then make sure you're taking ongoing action on those results. Time abundance is the new rich. Feeling like we have free time or even just enough time to get everything done is one of the keys to creating happiness. Now, sometimes a team or an entire organization can be under a tight deadline, or like our healthcare systems have been in crisis, and having an abundance of time simply isn't an option. But if that's the regular expectation, if your employees are constantly working against the clock, you're going to have unhappy, burned out employees and probably a high turnover rate that's going to cost the organization a lot of money. And the fact of the matter is we just aren't our best selves when we're time stressed. There's a famous study by Darlene Batson, completed in 1973, but still really relevant today. In this study, Princeton Theological Seminary students were presented with a staged Good Samaritan scenario. Now, the Good Samaritan is the story of a man who was attacked and then left for dead on the side of the road. And in the story, people who thought they were too important or too busy passed by the man and didn't stop to help him. And the guy who finally stopped was from Samaria. He is the Good Samaritan, thus the name for the story. Now, this is a story any seminary student would be very, very familiar with. In the study, each student was told they needed to give a talk about the Good Samaritan, and they were told they were either late and they had to hurry to get to the place where they were speaking, or they had plenty of time to get there. On their way, the students encountered this staged scenario with a man slumped in the doorway. He was coughing and moaning in obvious distress. It was very clear that he needed medical attention and help. Now, did the students stop to help? Did they take the role of the Good Samaritan, the story they were thinking about, the story they were on their way to talk about? The researchers found that in the group of students told to hurry, only 10% stopped to help the man. And some of the students literally stepped over the guy on their way to where they were going to go speak. So in the follow-up with the students, the researchers found the 90% who didn't stop, it wasn't that they didn't notice the man. It wasn't that they didn't care. And it wasn't that they didn't feel this pull of compassion to stop and help him. They felt like they didn't have the time. When we feel like we don't have enough time, we are much less likely to act in accordance with our own personal values. Your employees want to do their best work. They care about their work. But when they feel time stressed, they're not bringing their best selves to their job. They're just going to get the stuff done, but not to the best of their abilities. So remember the stat earlier about the accuracy of tasks? Happy employees are 19% more accurate at their tasks. Allowing time, giving people an abundance of time whenever possible, it helps them to do their best work and to bring their prime skills and values to their work. When you allow time, it creates space for your people to be happier. How is company culture communicated? It's through the stories that get told. And here's the thing, stories are being told. Your organization's culture is being shaped every single day. Possibly even right now in this moment, somewhere a story is being shared about your group. And if you're not actively telling the right stories, you're missing a huge opportunity to move the company to a happier place. As humans, we are naturally biased toward the negative. It's a survival mechanism built into our lizard brains. We share negative news and stories much more easily than we share positive news and stories. It's just how we're wired. As a leader, you have to intentionally tell those stories that shape the narrative you want for the organization, the stories that showcase your culture and beliefs in action, the stories that push the company in the direction of happiness. Now, you have plenty of these stories, but most of them will not circulate without intention. The bad stories are going to spread themselves everywhere, but the good stories are going to stay in the background for the most part if they're not actively, intentionally told and shared. So you want to tell stories that show how your company demonstrates its values. You want to tell stories that praise your employees. You want to tell stories that reinforce your vision, because aligning with the vision is part of increasing systemic happiness. Alex Kroof is the founder and former CEO of Woohoo Inc. It's the Danish company that created Heart Count, one of those measurement tools we talked about earlier. He shared this story with me recently. A friend of his is the HR manager of another company in Denmark, and one of their core values is respect. So one day, one of their employees was at a client's doing some work, and the client was openly racist toward the employee. The employee was not of Danish origin, and the employee finishes up the job. He just sort of ignores it, but he gets back to the office and he goes to Alex's friend, the HR manager, and says, "Hey, this happened with this client." So the HR manager goes to the CEO, and the CEO, what does he do? He calls the client and he fires them, terminates the contract on the spot. He says, "We treat our people with respect, and we expect the same from our clients. Your contract with us is terminated." Click. Instead of the organization just having a sign on the wall, "Respect is one of our core values," and then expecting everyone to know and believe it, they actively engaged that value. And then they told that story throughout the whole company. They aligned the company value with a story of actually implementing that value. Can you imagine being an employee at that company and hearing that story as it circulated? Those employees have a new example, a narrative that provides concrete evidence of how the company values them. They can now reference that story as an example of how the organization aligns with their beliefs and puts their employees first. Zappos is a fascinating company from several aspects. So they define their culture in these 10 core values that are not typical to other core values of companies, because these are actually action statements. And they take these so seriously. They celebrate their values. Every hire is based on how well the prospect displays and lives these 10 values. Now, this first value, deliver wow through service, it's apparent in every single thing they do. Now, if you don't know, Zappos is an online shoe retailer, but they will tell you they are a customer service company. Their focus is on providing the very best customer service possible. And, they just happen to sell shoes. Now, if you get hired at Zappos, no matter what role you are hired into, you start by answering phones in the call center. They believe every employee needs to be intimately familiar with the customer process. And during their busy seasons, every person at the company, from the CEO on down, signs up for shifts to answer phones. They believe how they serve their customers is the most important thing they do, and they are serious about delivering wow. Now, traditional call centers use a metric called average handle time as a way to measure efficiency. So industry standard average handle time is 6 minutes and 10 seconds. But efficient handle time and wow don't necessarily go hand in hand. Zappos doesn't just encourage longer calls, they celebrate their longest calls. In 2011, their longest call was 8 hours and 47 minutes. The whole company celebrated when they broke that record the next year. And in 2016, the record was broken again with a call that lasted 10 hours and 43 minutes. That 2016 call started when a college student from here in the Midwest called to buy a pair of boots. She and the sales rep got to chatting as they squared away the order. Stephen Weinstein, the Zappos customer service rep, said, "It was excellent. The connection was amazing. And even though I never spoke to this customer before in my life, I felt like I'd known her for 15 or 20 years. It was just natural and time was flowing. It just felt effortless." And they talked about all sorts of things through the almost 11 hours they were on the phone together. Life, movies, favorite foods. The college student was considering moving to Vegas, so they talked about what it was like to live there. The actual purchase of the boots was a very tiny part of the phone call. And a company spokesperson said about this particular call, "Sometimes people need to just call and talk. We don't judge. We just want to help." Every employee at Zappos knows the stories of these 10-hour plus phone calls. Whenever the record is broken, the whole company celebrates. They know they are delivering the wow they talk about in their first core value. They are fully aligned with their value, and they tell these stories all the time. Telling stories is one way an organization creates happiness and builds a place where people want to stay and work hard because employees are hearing the stories of their purpose and their value. Southwest Airlines has imbued every part of their company culture with an intentional focus on happiness. Happiness of their employees, their customers, and their stakeholders. Beyond the impact on the bottom line, there are thousands of stories demonstrating the power of this focus on employee happiness. One of my favorites of these stories is from 2011. A grandmother called Southwest Airlines to arrange a flight for her husband. She explained what was going on to the ticketing agent, and the agent struggled to hold back tears throughout the whole transaction. You see, the grandfather was traveling from LA to Denver for the most tragic reason you can imagine. His 3-year-old grandson had been murdered. The woman explained she was the step-grandma, so it was so much more important that the grandfather get there to be there in time with his daughter that night when her child, his grandchild, was taken off life support at 9 p.m. The grandfather gets to LAX as soon as his ticket is arranged, but the lines are endlessly long. He's on the verge of tears, and he's trying to explain the situation to anyone who will listen so he can get assistance from TSA so he can make it on time to his plane. But it's TSA. If you've flown, they don't care. No one was willing to listen to the man's story, so he just waits in line, watching the time. Finally, he gets through security. He grabs his shoes and belt out of the bin and runs in his stocking feet to his gate. He knows he's too late. He knows he's missed the flight. He knows that he is not going to be there in time to be with his daughter that night. But he runs anyway, because what are you going to do? As he approaches the gate, he sees a pilot standing there. And the pilot, upon seeing the grandfather running toward him, cried out, "Are you Mark? We held the plane for you. We're so sorry about the loss of your grandson." The grandfather can't believe it. He's "Are you serious? You held the plane for me? I can't thank you enough for this." And the pilot said, "Listen, they aren't going anywhere without me. And when I heard your story, I knew I wasn't going anywhere without you. Now just relax. We're going to get you there, okay? And again, I'm so sorry." Now, plane delays can be incredibly expensive for an airline, right? So how did Southwest respond when they learned what the pilot had done? What did they say when they found out he had intentionally delayed an entire flight full of people for a single passenger? Their spokesperson said this: "I think we would all agree that the pilot absolutely made the right decision. I can't think of a better example of great service for our customers." Now, perhaps shifting your culture won't have such a dramatic impact as that of a grandfather holding his dying grandson's hand. Do you think Herb Kelleher had any idea back in 1967 that he was paving the way for that grandfather to be there that night with his daughter and his grandson? No. Herb Kelleher had the vision that creating a culture focused on employee happiness was good for the company. But what we understand now is creating a culture focused on employee happiness is good for humanity. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Wow, I know in this COVID time, we all need a little more happiness in our lives and work, for sure. Let's see if anybody has any questions for you. Anybody? Raise your hand. Nelson, go ahead, Nelson.
Had to get unmuted. Well, the question about the airline story is, what about all the other passengers who were inconvenienced?
They didn't report that. There were several news articles about this. This was actually, the story came out, the company didn't know, and a reporter heard the story and wrote an article about it and then reached out to the company for a statement. And no one ever talked about the other passengers, so I don't know for sure.
Anybody else? Feel free, if I don't see you. Go ahead, Rick.
I asked this in chat. Would any of the happiness measurement tools work for Columbus Rotary?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Either of those. And I've had other Rotary clubs ask me about this, like, what can we do for our own Rotary club? And having this awareness of how the organization is working for people can be pretty valuable. I don't know of any clubs that have actually started using either of those tools, but either of them would be very appropriate. The questions that they ask each week, because they send you an email each Friday morning, and there are 3 questions, and you just click, 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 and then submit, and it shoots right on through. And then you can see your own little dashboard and the company dashboard and all of that. And they are work related, so people would have to understand that these are specific to Rotary and not their work. But yeah, those tools would absolutely work.
What's a rough idea of cost?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to look that up, but I can email that to you.
Sure.
I know Woohoo Inc. is $7 per person I think per month, but then they have, and Friday Pulse has ranges, but I can look that up for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Looking for hands. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
I think that there's now 4 generations that are in the workforce, from baby boomers to Gen Z, obviously with different values or, different workplace happiness incentives. How are companies managing that intergenerationally?
That's a good question, and there's a lot of companies really struggling with that because what our Boomer and Gen X leaders are finding out is that our millennials and our Gen Zs don't care about compensation or the things that have normally motivated our older generations. Pretty typically, what it's come down to is culture. Our younger people, especially, we all want culture that fits us and that we fit into, because we all want that sense of belonging. That's so important. Our younger generation, though, they're willing to give up other things for that. So they will leave they'll leave a company not necessarily because they're going to make more money here. They'll take a lower salary if it's a better fit, or if they believe in the purpose and vision of the company. There's a lot of factors that play into that, as in a very general sense. Obviously, each person is individual and what motivates them is different. But in a very general sense, what we're finding is this shift for culture is so vital because our younger people won't stick around if they don't like the culture.
Good. Thanks, Alex. Hugo, did you have a question?
Is your PowerPoint available to share?
Sure. I can send that to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay.
I'll put it in comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Last chance. All right. Well, Aimee, thank you so much for sharing your message of happiness this week with us. And we wish you the best of success with your new book.
Thank you.
And have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Yep. I want to thank you for joining today. I hope you all have a happy week. Please share our Zoom invites with friends and let others that you didn't see today know that we are still meeting each week by Zoom. And if they need help, to reach out to Scott. And with that, we are adjourned. Everybody have a great week.